Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Anisha from Oman Book Lovers Club, and thank you so much, everyone who's joining in today for the season finale of season one of Live Chats at OBLC. An idea that just developed into this fabulous series, a very small idea that just took shape, and here we are. I cannot express my joy as I speak today. It has been an honor, a delightful experience to talk to each author, each one of them award winning, best selling, representing diversity in all possible ways, authors for different age groups, writing different genres, and from very diverse backgrounds around the globe. Before we get started with our chat today, I would like to take this opportunity to talk very briefly about Oman Book Lovers Club. Founded for the sheer love for books and reading to borrow, share, exchange books, and meet fellow book lovers, it has since then transitioned into so much more and created its own identity. The vision is to connect all book lovers in Oman, to make it one stop for all things books, all information on books and book lovers and reading. We have something for everyone. Connect with fellow book lovers and talk about your favorite books. Share your books, borrow from other members, meet fellow book lovers through virtual meets for different genres, read along book of the month, followed by book discussions, very soon face to face meetups coming up, and all of this replicated in our kids club and teens club, club coming soon. There are book reviews, recos, people seeking suggestions for books for themselves and for kids, members growing each other's TBR, you name it. Members can choose which activity they enjoy most and engage with that. A happy space for all book lovers in Oman. And now is the time to plan for 2022 to make it more engaging for all members and book lovers in Oman. Today is the season finale. Today, in the season finale of Live Chats at OBLC, we are talking to the very amazing Katherine Center, best selling contemporary fiction author. So let's bring Katherine on.
Hi.
Hi, Katherine. It's really nice to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time. It has been a pleasure collaborating with you. It
Oh,
amazes
thank you.
it really amazes me, and literally I have no words to express how thrilled I am to be in your presence, to have had the opportunity to engage with you over the past months. So I'll start with a little introduction from my side. While Katherine Center needs no introduction for all our viewers, Katherine Center is the best-selling author of 8 heartwarming, adorable novels, and ninth one is already up for pre-order, coming out June 2022. Two of her books are Netflix movies: The Lost Husband, that dominated Netflix in August 2020, and Happiness for Beginners is currently in the making, and we'll talk more about it. Catherine's work has appeared in Red Book, O Magazine, InStyle, People, USA Today, Vanity Fair, The Atlantic, Real Simple, Southern Living, and many others. Book Page calls her the reigning queen of comfort reads. Her books have made countless best of lists, including Real Simple's Best Books of 2020, Amazon's Top 100 Books of 2019, Goodreads Best Books of the Year, the Indie Next Great Reads list, Book List Top 10 Women's Fiction, and many more. You should visit her website, www.katherineCenter.com, to know more about her and her books. Not just a very talented author, Katherine is such a warm and vibrant person. Everything around her resonates that. Her presence is so full of life. Her writing, her stories, the whole aura, the colors of her book covers, and her social media presence, everything reflects who she is. What goes on in the mind of a person who can write all this beautiful work of fiction that can have such a powerful and positive impact on readers. We shall explore how she does that and how she brings her warm, accessible, insightful style to a wide range of topics, especially why we all need to read for joy. So, welcome, Katherine, once again. And again, we are very pleased and honored to be talking to you today.
Thank
So,
you.
to start with, Katherine, I would really request you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, the person behind the author, a little about your life, some fun facts, just to kickstart the conversation.
Yeah, I live in Texas, and I'm from here, and I'm a mom. I have two teenage kids, and I'm married, and we have a dog. And we live a kind of lovely, cheerful, quiet, pleasant little life. We have a garden, and We cook a lot.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
I think I'm a person who's always sort of trying to be grateful for any blessings that come my way, large or small. And I don't
Yeah,
know that it's always an easy thing to do, but I'm always really working on it. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I write the kinds of books that I write. It's because I'm trying to write books that sort of do the same thing.
yeah. So coming to books, for people who haven't yet been introduced to the world of Casey, let's talk about what kind of books do you write? Why this particular genre, and are these based on real experiences?
Oh, that's a good question. So I would say that the type of books that I write are kind of bittersweet comedies. So they're always funny. There's always a lot of joking around and bantering. I'd say the funniest things about my books are typically the things that people say to each other. You know, they kind of joke around with each other a lot. So that's kind of where the comedy is in the chatting and the dialogue and the conversation. And then they also have these kind of bittersweet elements, and those things are usually more in the plot. Usually the main character, and actually often other characters too, have sort of hard things that they're sort of struggling through or trying to figure out how to deal with. And so the books have this kind of combination of sort of funny and sad, which is kind of my sweet spot in life, because I think that I am, as a person, very, very tuned in to like kind of all of life's sorrows and frustrations and hardships. Like that, for whatever reason, I just came into the world with a very good antenna for that stuff, for myself and for other people. But one of the ways that I've always kind of coped with my sort of slightly melancholy personality is to crack a lot of jokes, right? And to really try to lighten my life experience by diving into comedy as often as possible. So, you know, it's definitely, joking around is my primary coping mechanism for life. You know, whenever things are hard at our house, whenever we have a sick kid or we're worried about something as a family, we are cracking extra jokes as our way of sort of coping with things. So yeah, so for me, you know, comedy and tragedy in life kind of live side by side. You know, I think that humans invented comedy because of tragedy. Like, it makes a lot of sense that you could have both in the same situation, because I think that comedy exists because of tragedy. You know, because human life is really hard and we have to find ways to make it a little better and a little easier. So that's what I kind of do. I write these books that are funny and sad. And I forgot the second part of the question, but it was a good one, but I've already forgotten what it was.
Yeah. So are these based on some real life experiences? Why this genre? Why did you choose this particular genre to write?
So I would say that for me anyway, all fiction is kind of like making a collage. You know, so you're taking bits and pieces from all different places and you're pasting them together into something that's very much its own thing. So there are always elements of real things in the stories that I write. I pull from real things, but I'm also pulling from lots of other places, things I see in the news, things friends tell me about, things I dreamed about, things that just popped into my head. You know, you're always, if you're writing fiction, you always kind of, it's like you're walking around with a butterfly net and you're just, these great little ideas are floating around in the air and you're just trying to kind of catch them and find a way to put them together into a story that's meaningful and fun to read. So yeah, I would say there's always elements of true things in the stories that I write, but there's also a lot of stuff that's just made up or pulled from a million different places. And by the time it all comes together, it feels very much its own thing.
Yeah, so it's not exactly based on real life experiences, but then everything that is going on around you kind of contributes, if that's the right word.
Yeah, you know, I haven't had enough life experiences to sustain a career. You know, I mean, you have to, if you're going to write stories, fiction, if you're going to write fiction stories, I think you have to be able to draw from things that are authentically true and meaningful in your own life, but also pull from the whole world. You just need a bigger, resource to pull from. So always a little bit, but not entirely everything. It would be very limiting if you could only read about things that had happened to you.
Yeah. True, very true. So, tell us about your journey as an author because you've really been writing for a long time. What made you venture on this path of writing? And what does it take to become a published author? Again, a two-part question, your own journey, and for aspiring authors, especially, there are a lot of people who would like to know more in detail about what does it take to become a published author?
Yeah, those are two good big questions. So the first one about how I became a published author is, I decided that I wanted to be a writer when I was 12. So I was in the 6th grade, and I was very awkward in the 6th grade, and I was very hard on myself, and I was very kind of socially miserable in the 6th grade. And I was kind of just suffering that year. I was not happy, and I was, not happy with myself and my life. And I could kind of see the long distance that existed between where I was and kind of where I someday wanted to be. And I had no idea how to get there. But I was very lucky that year because I had 2 best friends who were also awkward and also miserable. And we somehow got this idea that we should start writing stories together about the 1980s boy band Duran Duran.
Yeah.
We all had crushes on the guys in Duran Duran, and we decided that we would write stories about meeting them, and we would cast ourselves as the main characters in the stories. And so there were 3 of us, and we each wrote a different story, and we each politely included each other as secondary characters in our stories. And we would sort of suffer through the school week, and then on the weekends we would get together and have sleepovers, and we'd like put on our PJs, and we'd like jump onto somebody's bed, and we would open up these little spiral notebooks, and we would read our stories out loud to each other. And it was so much fun to do that. I mean, it was so blissfully fun that I kind of got hooked from then on. I mean, it was sort of like my first little taste of the sort of very particular magic that stories have. Stories have this ability to change your life. They have this ability to create this kind of magic that you get lost in. And stories actually have a very particular quality about them that nothing else in human life has.
Yeah.
Because when you engage with a work of fiction, whether it's something you're watching on Netflix or it's something that you're, reading, it is in this funny in-between space because you know that it's not true. You know it's fiction. You know it's made up. You know it's not real, but you believe it anyway. When you're reading the story, you believe it anyway. It feels very real to you. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. Because that's how stories can make you cry. That's how stories make you laugh. That's how fictional characters start to feel like real people. And if a writer has really done a good job writing their story, you're not just like watching that story from afar. You step inside that story and you get lost in that story. And what I'm always trying to do is create main characters that are so easy to relate to that you really kind of step into their skin. Yeah. And then you're going through an experience, not just with that character, but like as that character. You want what they want, and you care about what they care about, and you long for what they long for. And when they're scared, you're scared. And when they fall in love, you fall in love. You're feeling their feelings. And to me, that's such an incredibly transformative experience because it's like the most intense form of human empathy. It's this ability to imagine that you're somebody else, and you get this chance to step outside of your own skin and be someone else for a while. And when you do that, you have this really profound opportunity to learn all these life lessons that your own life never could have taught you, right? And pull wisdom out of somebody else's life experience in ways that your own life couldn't offer. So So that's all a lot of big thinking for a very basic concept that I did not understand at the age of 12, that stories can save you. That stories are really, really powerful teaching tools and engines for transformation and wisdom. So I got hooked at 12, and I spent, pretty much the rest of my life trying to figure out how to write, how to be good at it, right? How to write stories that more than just my mom would want to read, how to write stories that would call to people and mean things to them and engage them and keep them turning pages. I've basically spent the rest of my life from that moment on obsessing over stories and how they work and trying to get really, really good at them. And it's a very long journey because I decided that I wanted to be a writer at the age of 12, and I did not publish anything at all until I was 32. So it took 20 solid years of trying. I mean, I wasn't like doing something else during that time. I was going to graduate school. I was taking English classes. I was taking writing classes. I was sending short stories to the New Yorker and getting rejected. I was actively working to try and become a writer, and I didn't ever get published until 20 years later. So that's kind of how it started. And that actually leads us into your second question about publishing. I think the tricky thing about wanting to be a writer that's different from a lot of other professions is that there's not really an established path. If you want to be a veterinarian, there's kind of a series of steps that you go through to try and do that. If you want to be a doctor, you do a certain series of steps. With being a writer, it's a little trickier because almost everybody's journey is completely different. And it has a lot to do with, working really hard, getting really good, because, the competition is really fierce. So if you're gonna actually publish things, you have to be good enough that you can get in there with that competition, and not giving up, and then getting lucky, right? And stumbling on some good luck. And actually, I want to make a distinction between publishing and writing, because I think writing is absolutely for everybody. Everybody owns that. Everybody should have that. If you want to write a journal, if you want to write a little book for your family about the story of your life that they can treasure and keep and carry forward for generations, if you want to write a book for your kids, like a fun little book about a dog for your kids, that's you. You get to do that. Nobody can stop you from doing that. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. And to me, writing is always an incredibly joyful, incredibly nourishing, incredibly good for you activity. So I always encourage absolutely everybody, if you want to write, you should write. The next level is the question about publishing. And that's harder. That's a harder world. It's a very competitive world. There's a huge amount of failure and disappointment and struggle. I mean, case in point, 20 years of trying to get started and, really having to work very hard and not give up and deal with a lot of despair and self-doubt and all these things. So getting published is not easy, and there's no real easy way to do it. There are strategies, there are thoughts, but writing is easy. Writing belongs to everybody. Writing is free.
Yeah. So would you tell us a little bit more about your publishing journey? Like, how did you manage to get your first book published?
Yes, that happened sort of by accident. So I had gone to college and majored in English and creative writing, and I had won the Vassar College Fiction Prize, which was, all the kids who go to Vassar, they're all writers, so steep competition. And then I had gone on to graduate school. I got a fellowship to go to graduate school in creative writing. So I got a master's in creative writing. And then I spent about 8 years writing short stories and trying to get them published and failing. 8 solid years. I was working in a bookstore. I was teaching creative writing to little kids as a side gig. And I was sending out short stories, trying to get them published and getting rejected just over and over and over again. It was very depressing. Everyone in my family felt very sorry for me. I was the tragic ne'er-do-well of the family. And it was just a really long, frustrating time when I spent a lot of time thinking that I probably should quit. I kind of kept thinking that the smartest thing to do would be to just quit and get another job. that wasn't so hopeless. But I couldn't seem to make myself quit. That was the problem. You know, I would decide I was quitting. I would say, you know what, this is not healthy. I'm done. I'm out. And I would decide to quit. And then like 2 weeks later, I'd get another idea for a story and I'd start up again. And it all felt very sad.
Wow.
So that went on for a long, long time. And then one day I was at the park with a friend of mine. I had written a novel kind of on a dare from my big sister. And I had written it and I loved it and I thought it was amazing. And I had started trying to think about trying to publish it, but that was very intimidating. And then I got pregnant again with my second child. And then suddenly I was back in Newbornville and I was just doing mom stuff. And the novel wound up in a drawer. Like I had it all ready to go, but I just put it in a drawer and I forgot about it. And I was just being a mom. And then one day I was at the park. My kids were maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 5 and 2. I was at the park with another mom and she spotted a woman across the way who was a published novelist. And so she said, that woman over there is a novelist. You should go over there and talk to her and get her to help you publish your book that's in a drawer, right? And I felt very shy about doing this. I really didn't want to do it. I sort of panicked, but my friend didn't feel shy at all. And she just marched right on over there. And she was like, that's my friend Catherine over there. She's written a novel. I've read parts of it. It's really funny. Don't you want to help her get it published?
Oh, we all need such friends.
I know. It was great. And this very kind woman agreed to read the first 3 chapters of the novel. So I emailed them off to her that afternoon. And then she wrote back the next day and said she would like to pass them along to her agent. And then, so she did. And then her agent actually wrote back within the hour of getting those 3 chapters saying that she wanted to see the whole manuscript. So I sent I just emailed off this 300-page document to this total stranger in Los Angeles. And she read it and she got back to me within a week and she said, I love your novel and I can sell it. So so we got started. Like a couple days later, she had sent it off to 8 different publishing houses in New York. There were 4 that were interested and they were all really big publishing houses. It was Putnam, Random House, St. Martin's, and HarperCollins. Were all interested, big publishers, and she got them into an auction and then she got them into a bidding war. And they went all day long. I mean, she would just call me like every hour or 2 and be like, they're still going, you know, I'll call you later. And
it's like all because of your hard work and perseverance and not quitting was paying off.
It really was. And, you know, it's like a Cinderella story. And at the end of the day, Random House won. It was a 2-book hardcover deal with Random House. And that's how it all got started. I mean, that was kind of the happy ending of that whole situation. And then also like just the beginning, right? I mean, it was just the beginning of this whole long journey because that was back in 2006. And so there's been a lot that's happened. I mean, life goes on, right? You get your happy ending and then life keeps going and you have to figure out how to manage that happy ending. But it's been great. I mean, it's been awesome.
Yeah. How amazing. This is very, very inspiring. Really, you just did not quit for so many years. So before I go to my next question, we'll just take a few chats that have been coming in from our members. Charlotte has been constantly commenting on all the things that you're saying. So and I've been bringing it on the screen. That's our friend Charlotte Franklin. There's a question from the other members. Yeah. Hi, Charlotte. How do you recognize a good story from many stories? What would you say to that?
That's a really great question. So, you know, I think as a writer, you have to recognize what's a good story for you to tell. You know, because there's a quote that I really, really love about writing from this guy I love named Dwight V. Swain, who wrote a book years ago. He's like the great granddaddy of how to write books. And he said something that sticks in my head all the time. He said, a story is something you do to a reader. And I think about that all the time. What do I want to do to people? What do I want my stories to do to people? And really that question is, how do I want to make them feel?
Yeah.
And different stories are going to make you feel different ways, right? A thriller gives you a whole different set of feelings than a love story, right?
Correct.
And I'm so sorry, my phone is dinging. So, different stories do different things to you. And so, I've part of my journey of becoming a writer has been to try to figure out what I love in a story, what I love to have done to me as a reader. What am I hoping a book is going to do to me when I open up those covers? And to figure out how to do that for other people, right? To create stories that allow them to sort of feel the same things. And what I have decided that I love in stories, and this is always a journey and it can always change, but what I really love is I like to feel inspired, and I like to feel hopeful, and I like to feel like there's a chance that the human race is going to pull it together. I like to see stories about people who have to go through something hard and figure it out. I like stories about people who get knocked down by life and have to figure out how to get back up. So, those are the kinds of stories that like resonate for me. And, Stephen King would have a totally different list of things that he's interested in, right? But when I hear about something in the world, a story, a news article, something I dreamed about, something that happened to my mom in 1960, whatever it is, when those little ideas come by, if they seem like they have the potential to work in that context, to help build a story about something that's inspiring or meaningful in the ways that I like stories to be inspiring and meaningful, then I know that it's got something to it. And then I sort of keep a list. These ideas float by, and I have a little document on my computer where I try to write them down. But of course, half the time I forget to do that. Life gets busy and I never make it there, and they just get lost. But if they're good ideas, they circle back around. And then the second part of it is you have a bunch of little ideas or a bunch of little pieces, and then what you have to try to do is figure out which ones fit together right in a way that creates a kind of electricity or a kind of energy. So it's about collecting the right kinds of elements, and then it's about choosing from that big collection the right kind of elements to go together into any particular story that are going to help create a certain kind of experience for people that feels a certain way.
Yeah. That actually partly answered a question I was going to ask you later, but we'll come to that again. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. We have more questions from the audience, but I'll take that again later. To carry on with the topic of publishing and all, a brief question on also for members of the club and audience, what does it take to make writing a full-time career? I mean, the struggle to get published for the first time, but there are also lots of authors who have another career and they write along with it as a passion. So, what does it really take to be able to convert writing into a full-time career? Would you say to that?
I would say that writing fiction is not typically a great way to make money. It's something you really do for love more than for money. This idea of like wealthy writers, in their Rolls Royces wandering around drinking champagne is funny to me. That's not at all. Most writers are starving artists, right? Most writers don't make much money at all. Even writers who are actually publishing books and out there. It's not until you get to a certain level, you're really not making a lot of money. And I think that's one of the reasons why people typically have a day job and then write on the side. You don't want to quit your day job. I mean, you really don't want to quit your day job. Really, and there's no guarantee that this would ever happen, but really until you hit the New York Times list, honestly, you're probably not making enough to live on.
True.
That's just how it is. And I really had to struggle with that when I was younger because it was like we had 2 kids, we were trying to raise a family, and we were trying to figure out, like, financially, how do we make this work? And I was very lucky because I had a very supportive husband who thought what I was trying to do was great. And he was like, you know what? If this is what you're going to try to do, we'll figure it out and we'll make it work, right? And so it was many, many lean years of just trying to make it work, right? So the upside of that, however, and I think this is important to remember, is that even, like, I'm not sure that you would want to quit your day job, honestly, because something about having that structure and something about having all of those day-to-day interactions with whoever it is you're seeing at your day job, and something about interacting with the human world is actually inspiring, and it's good for you to have that structure, right?
Gives you those experiences that you need to create your stories.
Yeah, I mean, it can help. If you think of it in that way, it can be helpful to you. Because if you had nothing to do but lounge around in your pajamas, you might not ever get anything written. It's weird how that works, but it can be true. It helps to have editors and deadlines and people saying, hey, this is due on, March 1st. But really, until you're at that point, I think having a life going on in the real world can actually be inspiring for the stories that you're trying to write.
True.
So, I would say I've heard of people saying that they like, oh, I'm going to write a romance novel and make $1 million. That's not how that works. You writing is like anything, it's a long, slow burn. You work on it and you work on it. You're not going to be successful until you're really good. And that takes a long time. I mean, the great thing about writing as a job is that you'll never learn everything there is to learn. You'll never get bored. But you'll never get to a point where you've learned everything and you can relax. I mean, it's just a constant process of trying to learn all these different elements of how to write a great story, because it's incredibly complex craft, and you'll never know it all. You'll spend your life learning.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm saying, I think in terms of making it a full-time career, it's very much similar to any art form, I feel, as a career, because not everybody will become a billionaire, but some do. So it's just that you have to be good at it.
I would not bank on that, though. You know what I mean? Like you're sure some people win the lottery. It does happen. But that's not something to count on. You need to have a realistic plan in place if you really want to do it. For how you're going to survive. And I don't think there's I will say, I am a person who wrote for love for a long, long time. And my view was that this is what I loved to do. And I was grateful to get to do it. And I would sacrifice whatever I needed to sacrifice to get to live this life of making stories up all the time. So, I mean, you can decide that it's worth it to you. Absolutely. But I would definitely say the idea that you can just write a book and get real famous is, I mean, it just doesn't, it's a much slower process than that,
Yeah.
And there are no guarantees.
Yeah, I get that. I'll just bring on Nanita's comment. She's thanked you for the previous question you answered. We'll go to Shal, another one quickly before I'd like to ask you this. So I think in the previous answer, you did cover a little bit of elements of this, but I'll still ask this again in case you would like to add something. So about your writing process is what we wanted to understand. How do the stories happen, which you've covered briefly around, how you've in the answers till now, and how do you shape the book? I mean, once the story is happening in your head, the entire process, and also the characters' development. Do you think they take the inspiration from people around, or in any of your books, are there any characters which you think have taken after you?
Okay, those are great questions. I could go all day on this question. Let's see. So the question about how to shape the stories, that's something that I really think about a lot. The thing that is easiest for me with writing is dialogue. I never ever have to try to write dialogue. I never even have to think about it. If I sort of imagine two characters in a situation, they immediately start talking to each other and
Wow.
and saying funny things. And I basically am just taking dictation. I'm just writing it down. So for me, that part of it is very easy. I've never had to try to I've never ever read a book on like writing great dialogue because for whatever reason, that comes very easily to me. And that's kind of the thing that got me into the game is that it's such bliss for me to get to write boppity bop bop back and forth scenes with people talking to each other. That's the thing that's kind of kept me there. What's harder for me, what I have worked on much more actively with brain power, is plot and structure. Because it really does matter what the shape of a story is. For the emotional experience of the people reading the book. You need to structure it in certain ways, and different structures are going to give people different experiences. I think of it like a roller coaster. The structure is the track. Everybody gets in this little car and starts moving, and the track determines, like, are we going to go way up and then drop, or are we going to sort of circle around, or what are we doing, right? So when you're structuring a story, you're thinking about the shape of that story, and that's going to impact people's experience moving through the story. And when I was younger, I really thought that the voice of a story was the most important thing. Of course, I thought that because that was the thing that came easiest to me. So I wanted to think that. But I actually think that voice and structure are equally important. You've got to have, you've got to move people through the story in a way that when they get to the end, it feels satisfying. And satisfying can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different kinds of stories. But you need to be very purposeful about how you're moving people through those pages. And so that is the thing that I work on the hardest. I think about it all the time. I read books about it. I study it. I take notes because it doesn't come easily to me. And I'm always trying to get better at it. So that was answering the first part of that question. And I've now already forgotten what the rest of the parts of the question were.
Writing process. How do stories happen? How do you shape the book? Characters development. And are the characters inspired by people around you, or do you think any character in any of your stories is based on you?
Okay, so there's two big parts of that I'll answer. The one about are the characters based on me? I think that the main characters of every story that I've written have some element of me. They talk like me, for one thing. All my stories are written in the first person. So it's as if the narrator is just like sitting with you at a cafe over like a big cup of coffee and just telling you the story of this crazy thing that happened to her, right? And so the things that have happened to those characters are not things necessarily that happened to me, though some of them are. I definitely cull from my own life. But whether there are things that happen to me or not, I tell them the way I would say them if they had happened to me.
Okay. Yes.
You know what I mean? So the kind of voice of it is pretty much my voice. The voice the voice you're hearing in your head as you're reading is pretty much the way I would tell you the story if that were my story. So I'm kind of like channeling them, like I don't think of them as me. I think of them as their own selves. And they have distinct personalities and they're separate from me, but I'm kind of learning what the story is and then telling it as if it were my story.
You are the actor enacting the character in a way.
It's a little bit like that. Yeah, I think that's true.
That's where the elements of your personality do creep into the lead character of the story.
Yeah, and also, there are things that I struggle with that I give to these characters and let them struggle with it too. And part of the reason for that is that it lends authenticity to the story. It makes it feel much more real because it's something that I know about from the inside out. But it's also useful for me, if there is a thing I'm kind of struggling with, to get to learn about how to struggle with that thing along with that character. So I have a book called Things You Save in a Fire, and the main character, Cassie, is she's really trying to figure out how forgiveness works. She's really struggling with some people who have wronged her in her past, and how to let go of that, right? And how to move forward with that.
This is the one I'm reading right now.
Oh, well, forgiveness became a big theme in that story. And it's partly because I am not great at forgiveness. Like, I know that it's a good thing intellectually, like in my head, like I'm like, forgiveness is great. But that's a very different thing from actually knowing how to do it, right? Yeah. How do you do it? Like, I'm sort of baffled. I've got people I'm still mad at from middle school, and so I myself would like to be better at knowing how to let things go and move on and forgive people. And I know that it's good for you. And so writing this book gave me a chance to go read up on it. I read a bunch of stuff about psychologically how forgiveness works, how we do it, how we let go of these things. And then I was able to work that back into the book and talk about it a little bit with Cassie. So it was, I hope it's been meaningful for people to read about, but I know it was meaningful for me to write about because I learned a lot from going through that with her.
Yeah. Before we move to the next segment, I'm going to take some of the comments that have come in, which are reactions to what you're talking. So Charlotte says, I love the humorous side of your books. And there's a very, very funny comment from her. By one second. My husband thinks I'm bipolar when I'm reading your book. 1 minute I'm laughing, the next I'm crying. Yeah.
That's exactly, that really is what I'm trying to do. I do want to make you laugh, but I don't just want to make you laugh. Like, I want the stories to be moving also. And so moving back and forth between those things, I think helps give the stories their energy.
Yeah, that's what she says about the things you save in fire. Also, are you inspired by your own books?
Oh, that's a good question. I like them. I don't know if that's a good answer. I mean, occasionally, I just got advanced copies of my next summer book that's going to come out. And when they came in, I was like admiring the cover and sort of enjoying looking at the object and just sort of holding it and, bonding with the book. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, it was like hours later and I had just been reading, just happily reading. So I think I definitely am my own target audience in a lot of ways. I mean, I am definitely writing for sort of my own inner reader, and that's sort of my compass, right? That is the thing that guides me, because I think the worst thing that a writer can do is to try to write for some imaginary English teacher, right? Or some imaginary audience out there in the world. You've got to stay right here. You've got to say, if I had a free Saturday, right, and a fuzzy blanket and a hot cup of tea and a book, where would I want that book to take me? What would I want that book to do to me? And if you follow that compass and you write the book that you want to read, then you just have to hope that other people would like to read it too. But it's going to be a better book no matter what, because you're not using an external, meter for deciding what to do next or where to go next or what to focus on. You're using something very authentic and very real, which is your sort of own tender reader's heart. That's your.
Yeah. How lovely. So another question from Charlotte, because before I enter the segment 2, are you constantly reading, or do you break up, constantly writing, or do you take a break in between books?
Oh, I take breaks. Yeah, I'm not constantly writing. I think everybody's different on that, but I think of it almost like when I write a book, I have this well, and by the time I finish writing, the well is empty, and then I kind of have to give it a little bit of time to kind of fill back up. So I write a book, and usually I turn it in kind of May-ish of the year before it's going to come out. And then I kind of have a quiet summer. Usually I'm thinking about what the next book is going to be, but I'm not actively writing. I'm just kind of noodling on things. It's just kind of in my head, kind of like just cooking in there a little bit. I'm trying different things. I'm putting different elements in, and I'm seeing how they fit, and I'm reading. I do a lot of reading a lot of nonfiction about just things in the world to see if anything sparks anything. And then usually by the fall, I start really researching. Like I've kind of decided what it's going to be, and then I start researching, and I do that for a few months. And then I usually don't start writing until, this year I'm going to start writing in January. And I'll write until the book is due at the end of May. So
a year, so you have an annual calendar of writing. In theory,
I'm supposed to write a book a year. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes real life gets in the way, and don't, for whatever reason, it doesn't wind up that way. But broadly speaking, yeah, that's always kind of the goal.
Yeah. Okay, so I think a lot of talk about writing and the process and the publishing, but now let's get to the fun part, as they say. Let's talk about your latest book, Bodyguard, if we can. What's the inspiration? Again, similar question that we've talked about in the past, but with respect to Bodyguard, what's the inspiration? Do you think the character, of course, that's something you've already answered, that the character takes after you, and any inspiration from people close to you? So tell us about the story a little bit.
Okay, so my The Bodyguard is my next summer book. So it'll come out, I think it's July of next year. And so, but you can pre-order it right now. So don't, you can just like go to my website. There's a million places to just pre-order and get that done. Give yourself something to look forward to. So yeah, it was the book that I was writing, during kind of the worst, scariest, knock on wood, hopefully this is all in the past, parts of the pandemic. It was my sort of 2020 book that I was writing when I was kind of trapped, in the house. And, I tried to be very careful about the pandemic, and I was trying not to breathe on anyone or get breathed on. So, unfortunately I have a job where I can work from home in my pajamas. So I was working, but I was working at home. And I was home with both my kids and my husband and our dog, all four of us sort of smushed in together. And so for me, it was really, really fun to set this new book where I set it, because I set it on a Texas cattle ranch. For me, that's a very authentically true thing, because I am from Texas and my family has a cattle ranch.
Wow. I saw your posts on Instagram where you shared pictures of that cattle ranch where you set the story. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was my grandparents' place, and I grew up just scampering around on this ranch on the weekends. I grew up in the city of Houston, but my grandparents had this place that we went to all the time. And so, they have both passed away many years ago, and the big ranch house that was their place where I had so many slumber parties and had so much fun as a kid is still there, but we rent it out now to renters. And I had not been back to that house in, years, decades, because it's just become this other thing. But I still remember it. I remember it in the way that we remember those places from our childhood. Like I remember it in 3D. I could tell you every nook and cranny of that house. And so I decided to set the book out there so that I could go back and visit that house, in my head. So I was trapped in my real house, but mentally I'm out on the ranch, and I got to go. The Stapletons are the family who own this ranch, and in the story, and the house that I gave them is my grandparents' house. It's their exact house, and so there's all kinds of things going on. When the family is having breakfast, when the fictional family is having breakfast in the kitchen, they are sitting in my grandparents' kitchen in my head, right? And when Doc Stapleton, the sort of father of the family, is burning bacon with his wife's apron on and sort of, trying to blow the smoke away by fluttering the apron at it. That's happening in my grandparents' kitchen, right? That's my grandmother's apron. Like I see it all in this very, very way. So for me, it was this really nourishing sort of time travel thing got to do during the pandemic, where I got to go back to this very, very happy place from my own childhood and spend time there. But I wasn't just trying to remember vague things from the mists of time. I got to put these very fun fictional characters into that setting and watch them goof around and tease each other and, and have all kinds of fun. So that was really, really fun for me. It was my way of making my own sunshine during the pandemic. Very gray, in some very gray months there. It was my way of creating joy for myself. I had so much fun goofing around with these people.
There's a couple of comments on this. Charlotte says, I'm so tortured having to wait for it. Well, of course.
And I will also say that typically when I'm writing my books, I try to find this sort of balance between darkness and light. I think I love light, but I think you need some darkness to create some shadows to kind of define the light. So I try to have both. But I will say in The Bodyguard, I leaned very hard towards the light. I just felt like real life had enough shadows. And so I just made it as fun and funny and joyful as I possibly could.
Especially the time that you were writing, the whole globe was experiencing something very dark. So that, of course, that would have been, like you said, whenever there's tragedy, you try to cope with it by having light moments, by making a lot of jokes. So I'm sure that will reflect in the book. So Pajit says, wow, can we get a sneak peek preview of Bodyguard? Maybe a few lines that you would like to read out from it?
Oh my gosh. Do I have it nearby? I don't have it right here with me, but if we run out of time at the end, I could definitely find you something. I don't want to wander off and go find it right now. But yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I'll take.
My cute husband is walking over here and bringing me one. Oh, you're so sweet.
So sweet.
Okay, so here's the book.
Very pretty cover, just like all Katherine Center books. It's a statement, signature.
Yeah, it's got flowers all over it. So, actually, I could read you this, which I actually wrote, and I think it kind of captures it pretty well. Do you guys want to hear that?
Yes, please.
All right. So it says, she's got his back. Hannah Brooks looks more like a kindergarten teacher than somebody who could kill you with a corkscrew or a ballpoint pen or a dinner napkin. But the truth is, she's an executive protection agent, a bodyguard, and she just got hired to protect superstar actor Jack Stapleton from his middle-aged corgi breeding stalker. Jack Stapleton is a household name captured by paparazzi on beaches the world over, famous for, among other things, rising out of the waves in all manner of clingy board shorts and glistening like a Roman deity. But a few years back, in the wake of a family tragedy, he dropped from the public eye and went off the grid. When Jack's mom gets sick, he comes home to the family's Texas ranch to help out. Only one catch. He doesn't want his family to know about his stalker or the bodyguard thing. And so Hannah, against her will and her better judgment, finds herself pretending to be Jack's girlfriend as a cover. The more time she spends with Jack, the more real it all starts to seem. And there lies the heartbreak, because it's easy for Hannah to protect Jack, but protecting her own long-neglected heart is the hardest thing she's ever done.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a love story. It's a romantic comedy. I mean, it's just fun,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Beautiful. I'll just take another of your friend, I think has written this, or somebody who follows, Laura Lay. I've been reading Katherine since 2012. I've been a fan ever since. Love her voice.
Thank you.
All right. So the most exciting news recently, Happiness for Beginners turning into a Netflix movie. I saw your post from the sets. That must have been some other experience. I'm sure you've had the same experience before with The Lost Husband, but let's talk about the recent one. Tell us about the whole experience. What do you feel? What do you feel when your book, this is like second time that your book is being adapted into a movie. So first of all, what do you feel about it? And do you partner in the process of book being converted into the screenplay? And also tell us about your experiences from the sets.
Okay. Well, it's fantastic when this kind of thing happens. It's very thrilling. And the woman who is directing the Happiness for Beginners movie is also the woman who directed the last movie that happened, my book, The Lost Husband. So my book, The Lost Husband, got turned into a movie. It was supposed to come out in April of 2020. It was going to be in theaters all over the US. We were going to have a premiere in LA. It was like feeling like the most glamorous thing that could ever possibly happen. And then the pandemic happened and all the movie theaters closed down.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure that this would be a terrible thing for the movie. I thought, oh, well, and I felt really sad for the director, who is a lovely person and who I'm a huge fan of. And I knew how hard she had worked. Her name is Vicky White, and she's fantastic. Yeah. She also wrote the screenplay. So she took the book and adapted it into a screenplay, and then she directed the movie. And I felt terrible. I thought she's worked so hard. All these people, this whole crew, everybody worked so hard. And now, the pandemic is going to just eat it. Right. And then what happened was that movie got released quietly in April of 2020 on all these streaming services. And then people started watching it, and it became this kind of word of mouth sensation. It wound up doing really, really well. And then Netflix reached out to them about putting it on Netflix. And it went to Netflix in August of 2020. And it actually, the second day it was on Netflix, it shot up to #1. It was the #1 movie on Netflix for like 4 days in August. And it wound up in the top 25 movies for the year on Netflix. And then it got released internationally. And so it was all over the world, and it wound up in the top 10 movies in 30 different countries around the world, which was just amazing, because it was this quiet little Texas-y story, just this quiet little thing. But I think it's a very comforting story. And it was at a time when, we all needed a lot of comfort, right? And so people were watching it and telling their friends to watch it, and people were watching it over and over. So that's how that got started. It was this amazing, sort of astonishing, happy thing that wound up happening. And it did so well that Vicky was like, we should collaborate again. Let's do another one. And so that was going on sort of all this past year. We were sort of going back and forth. It did well with Netflix, the first movie. And so this new movie is actually going to be like a Netflix original. Netflix is kind of making it happen. And it's pretty exciting. Once again, Vicky took my book and translated it into a screenplay, which is always a kind of a tricky thing to do, because a book is 350 pages and a screenplay is about 90 pages. And a book has a lot of text and a screenplay has a lot of white space. But the rule about a screenplay is typically that, roughly speaking, 1 page of screenplay translates to about 1 minute of screen time. So you couldn't write a 200-page screenplay, right? Because that would be a very, very long movie. So you need to have it roughly be around 90 pages. So you really have to take this 350-page book and shrink it down into a much smaller version of itself. For it to work on the screen. And that's why, when you've loved a book, it can be hard to watch the movie, because it's gonna be different by virtue of the fact that it has to be changed. But she did such a great job with The Lost Husband. She kept really all the essential parts of the story. And I know she's done the same thing here. So with Happiness for Beginners, she cast Ellie Kemper to be the main character, the lovely, charming Ellie Kemper from The Office and from Kimmy Schmidt. And she was also in Bridesmaids. She was great in Bridesmaids. And then also they cast a super cute guy named Luke Grimes to play Jake, kind of the other of the two leads in the story. And he's on a TV show called Yellowstone. He plays Kevin Costner's son on this TV show, and he's very charming and very swoony. The women of the world seem very pleased with that casting. And then the one other person that I've been so thrilled about is they cast Blythe Danner, the lovely Blythe Danner, who's Gwyneth Paltrow's mom, to play Grandma Gigi, who's one of my favorite characters in the book. And so that's been really fun. They also cast a cute guy named Alex Koch to play Helen's little brother, Duncan. And I'm very fond of that character, Duncan, and I think they did a great job of casting him. He's super charming and hilarious. So I got to go to the set in October. I got to fly from Texas to Connecticut where they were filming, and I got to spend a day on the set. It was all very careful because of COVID protocols, and I had to get many tests. But I did get to go and spend a day watching them film. And I have to say, the cast is adorable. The people were so sweet and funny with each other. They were having so much fun making the movie. I was like, there's no way this movie won't be great, because you could just feel all the good energy happening on that set.
Your kind of, just very, very your kind of vibe to the sets as I hear it.
Yeah, and you know, when you're filming a movie, you don't just film the scene one time. You film it many times from different angles. You do close-ups, you know, so they're kind of doing the same scene over and over. And I will say that the scene that I was there for, every single time they redid the scene, it made me laugh. I laughed every time. And so I loved that. And I got to do a little cameo in the movie. So if you see it, and this won't be it'll probably be a year before it comes out, but if you see it, I'm in a wedding scene. I get to pretend to be a wedding guest, and I'm in the background drinking champagne with Blythe Danner, which made for a really, really fun day for me. I was very thrilled to get to
double motivation for us to watch the movie, of course, for the story that you've written, but also to watch you.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm also in The Lost Husband too. They very kindly let me come and do a little cameo in that one as well. So if you watch that one, and it's on Netflix, it's super easy. There's a farmer's market scene, and I am there purchasing goat cheese from my own main character in the farmer's market scene. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I have to go and watch it now. Just a comment from Parjeet there. It must be a great feeling to get published and then get a movie out of the book, I'm sure.
Yes, it is very great. I'm beyond grateful for it.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the next part. Let's talk about some of your previous books, briefly. Tell us about them. We have covered a lot about different books in all our different segments, but the stories and where did this inspiration come from, and any particular character that you would like to talk about. I know we have covered a large part of this question in the previous conversations, but it's there, so I had to ask it. So, in particular, you would like to add to whatever we've already talked about?
Oh my goodness. Well, How to Walk Away is a book that I wrote that's got a pretty red cover with flowers all over it. And it was my first book to ever hit the New York Times bestseller list. And I'm very, very fond of that book. I think it's got a lot of magic. And then the next book that followed it was a book called Things You Save in a Fire. And those two books are actually connected because there's a very, very minor character in How to Walk Away who winds up being the main character of Things You Save in a Fire. So it's not a sequel, but there's a little funny way that their lives kind of cross. And that's just that's just fun. And then that was actually so much fun. I wound up doing the same thing with two of my other books.
Yeah.
The book that
I've seen the connecting stories on the website.
Yeah. Happiness for Beginners was a book I wrote right before How to Walk Away. So not as many people have read that book because people hadn't heard of me as much back then. And that's the one that's becoming the movie. But then the book that I had that came out last summer is called What You Wish For. And it's actually that character of Duncan Carpenter, who's the little brother of the main character in Happiness for Beginners, is one of the main characters in What You Wish For. So I've found it's really fun to kind of create those universes and to find ways people to bring characters back and just play with them and let them kind of live on in different ways. And I will also mention that on my website for both of those two connected sets of books, I wrote a bridge story that connects the two books for each of them. And that's free and it's on my website. So if you need something to read, you can pop up. You can read it on the screen. And there's also an audio version where you can hear me reading it, which is also pretty fun.
Yeah, that's your voice, right? I read those bridge stories. That's what I was mentioning. Yeah. So to that, and answering the question to that, would you recommend that it is ideal to have the best experience to read your books in the order, right from the first one? I think the first one is Get Lucky, right?
No, the first one is from the way beginning is called The Bright Side of Disaster.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
from
So if
2007.
you
It's very
ideally to
old.
have, because there are these bridging stories and the connecting the characters. So would it be an ideal experience for a new Catherine Center fan to read right from the start, from the first book until the last?
I would say that's a really good question. I would say I think that I've gotten, or at least I've tried to get a little bit better with each book. The more times you do a thing, the
Yeah.
better you get at it, right? And so I think that my more recent books are
Hmm.
better than my early books, at least in the sense that I, as a grown-up person, all these
Hmm.
years later, because I've been at this a while now, I am much clearer about what I love in a story, and I am better at rendering that for other people now than I was
Yeah.
15 years ago. And so I would say I don't think it matters what order you read the books in. I think you can just read them however you want. There's nothing that will be confusing if you don't read them in the right order. But
Hmm.
what I typically suggest that people do is start with the newer books and kind of work your way back. Like when you've read the newer books and then you've got a hankering for another book, work your way
Hmm.
back to the earlier books because they still have the same sense of humor and the same voice, but they
Hmm.
just the newer ones are just I think a little bit stronger. So yeah, so read the
Okay.
older ones when you're running out of Katherine Center books would be my.
Very interesting one, actually. All right. So now coming to your own reading, what kind of books do you like to read? And do you think your writing does get inspired by what you read largely?
That's a good question. So I read very eclectically. I kind of read all over the place. And I like to read books in my own genre, but I also like to read books outside of my own genre because, in a way, when you're reading books that are a lot like what you do, it sort of is hard to turn off your inner editor, or it's like hard to like not think about what you would have done in that situation or how you would have done that scene. So in a way, I find that reading books that are similar to the books that I write makes it hard for me to relax and just get lost in the story because I'm still I've got my writer brain going.
Yeah.
I read a huge amount of nonfiction. I really, really love to read psychology books. I really, really love to read sociology books. I'm fascinated by how people do things and interact with each other and how the brain works. And I love reading books about human life from sort of all different angles, but I do have like a real love for nonfiction.
Hmm. So, sociology, like you mentioned, do you think that really helps you create your stories, build your stories? Does it inspire your writing?
It's funny. I actually tend to read those books just because I like them, just because I'm interested. I think they're interesting. I'm
Hmm.
sure that it does influence my thinking about how to live a good life. I'm really, really interested in that question, how to not waste our precious
Hmm.
time on this planet. I think about that a lot. And the books that I read that are nonfiction like that are typically in service of trying to answer that question.
Yeah.
So I was just reading a psychology textbook about coping, about how human beings cope, about what the strategies are that we use for taking a really bad situation we find ourselves in and making it a little bit better, right? Making it a little more bearable.
Yeah.
And I will say, a rather dry textbook. But for me, the topic is so interesting
Hmm.
that I don't care that it's dry. They don't need to entertain me. I'm just soaking up all of this information about how it works. Like, what are we doing? Um, so that will definitely work its way into the next book that I write, for sure. And maybe other books down the line, but definitely the one I'm about to start, I'm already thinking about elements of
Mhm.
that will work their way into the themes of this upcoming story because it fits really well with the story that I'm, about to start writing in January.
I'm coming to that question exactly just after this. But before that, something I would have just asked. Um, any favorite authors that you would like to talk about?
Oh my gosh, so many. Um, I love everybody in different ways. I love Kristen Hanna and Jodi Picoult. I discovered Christina Lauren last year. She's fantastic. Or it's actually two friends who work together. Their names are Christina and Lauren, and they write books together, and they're adorable. I just discovered Emily Henry and totally fell in love. She's got a couple of books that are just rollicking good page-turning times. I love to read. I love Leanne Moriarty. I love Jojo Moyes. I love Julia Quinn. I love love stories. I'm just a huge, crazy fan of love stories.
Yeah, all the authors you've named are sort of closer to your genre.
Yeah. That's true. And then of course I've got a whole, giant bookshelf of books about how stories work, books about human psychology. But as far as fiction goes, when I come across a fiction writer who is able to just grab me, by the seat of the pants and yank me through that story, I get so excited. I mean, I just completely fall in love and just want to shout from the rooftops, like, everybody needs to go read this book. So that's really fun when that happens. It's a joy to come across really great other writers.
Awesome. And this brings us to our last question for today from me, but we'll see if there's anything else from the audience. So what's up next? We know about Bodyguard, but then what are you writing? So I know you are very excited and can't wait to read it, but what after that? What can we look forward to? What are you writing next?
So yeah, I'm starting a new book. And I've done a ton of research on this book. I've been doing a ton of writing, like outlining and notes and things like that in little notebooks, trying to get ready. I haven't actually started the fiction writing part yet. That's going to be in January. It was kind of a busy fall. Normally I try to start a little bit in the fall and get kind of ahead of the curve before New Year's. But this year was busy. So I am ready to hit the ground running. I find that when you've got a really great story idea, you just carry around this sort of tingly feeling of excitement right here. And this story has that. There's a lot of magic in this story. I'm not going to get too much into the details because I'm not actually sure exactly what's going to happen just yet. I've got elements of the story that are there and are definitely going to be happening, but I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We're going to find out when I get started. But I cannot wait. I'm just chomping at the bit to get started on the story because I already can see these people. I see where they live. I know what they're struggling with. I'm ready to help them get it figured out. And I kind of can't wait to see it all shake down. So yeah, I'm very excited to start this new book.
Awesome. I'm just going to take a couple of comments from Charlotte, who has been answering as you speak. It's easy to see why your books become movies. When I read them, I see that as a movie. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
My first book of yours, Everyone is Beautiful, this year, and I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
And she's going to read. Yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
No. Just some of my older books have gotten new covers recently, which has been fun. So Everyone is Beautiful and Bright Side of Disaster both got reissued this year with pretty new flowery covers, which is fun. So thank you for finding that. That's an older book, but I have a little special spot for it.
And also I think she is referring to the one about the connecting stories, love discovering the connection. And a very beautiful comment from her also saying she just got the audiobook and movie as a gift for her daughter. How lovely. All right. I think that's about it from my side. If there's anything else that you would like to add, Katherine.
There's one thing I'll mention. I have a newsletter that is really fun. It's called 3 Good Things. I send it out about 4 times a year, 4 or 5 times a year. And it's called 3 Good Things. And it's basically whatever news I have, I sort of put it at the bottom, but up at the top, I always recommend 3 amazing things that I found out in the world. So it's like, here's a great podcast, here's a great song, here's an artist I just fell in love with. It's just things, because I am a person who falls in love with things. And when I find a song that I love, I just want to tell everybody about it. And I just get really excited and I want to share and I want to lift other people up who are doing cool stuff. So that's one of my favorite parts of my writing life is just kind of quietly working on these little newsletters and sending them out periodically and sharing cool things with people. So you can try it. If you go to my website, there's a little tab that says newsletter. And you can sign up for it and just give it a try and see if you like it. There's also an archive with older ones, and you can look through them and see if it's something you'd be interested in. But if it's not your thing, if you sign up and feel like, you're getting too many emails and you feel overwhelmed, you can totally unsubscribe and I will never know, and it won't hurt my feelings at all. It's very low pressure.
That's a wonderful way of saying it. Yes, that's lovely. So it's been really, really wonderful talking to you, Catherine. I just can't express how happy I feel right now. And we can't really thank you enough for taking the time to join us. Another one, last one from Parjeet. This is so great. Thank you so much for sharing so much with us. Yeah. So, so thank you everyone for joining us today for the season finale today and for each episode of season one. I'm working on season two already, months ago, since months, and authors are already in touch. But it's time to take a little break, and we will come back to launch our season two very soon. Once again, thank you everyone for all the encouragement. Happy 2022 and happy reading to all the book lovers out there. Thank you and good night and good day, Catherine. Just wait in while I end stream and we will talk. Thank you so much. Thank you.